Did you just open a new LLC and you're curious what you need to do to make sure that your LLC is set up legally correctly, that you own it the right way, your operating agreement's done the right way, that you're protected from being sued, that maybe you have agreements with your partners that make sense? Well, today I have an attorney on who especially works a lot with foreign owned US businesses, who's going to give us some insights and answer questions. We're going to have a conversation about what you need to do to be legally protected with your LLC. And I think formally it's the biggest legal mistakes that new US business owners make. It would be the theme of the conversation. So, Joseph, thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me, James.
So, to jump right into it, I'm going to share your information in the description below. If you want to look him up, he's you'll see how smart he is in the video. And you can look him up and ask him legal questions. He's an attorney. You're an attorney, right, Joseph?
Yes, I am.
So I'm a CPA. I do taxes. Joseph does law, and I talk to people all the time. And I say I don't. They say, "Give me a great operating agreement." I said that is a legal document. You need to work with an attorney. So Joseph, tell me in your experience, what is like one of the biggest mistakes that you see new business owners make?
There are two groups that I work with, all foreign entrepreneurs. The first group are entrepreneurs who open up a U.S. business and plan to operate it from abroad. And the other group are entrepreneurs who are applying for a visa and need a business here. And either they have one or they need to set one up in order to get the visa. There are some investor visas like that. But I would say the biggest problem for both tends to be the failure to have any sort of an operating agreement. They just blow it off completely, which you can do. I mean, you can set up your company, you can get a tax ID number, you can do all these things, and you could just not have an operating agreement, and that could work maybe for a little while, but eventually you're going to get in trouble. Eventually something's going to happen where you're going to need it, and I do find that some of them just don't do it, or they don't do it at all, or they do it improperly.
So I on the channel, I in the last month I had two videos where I opened LLCs and they give you this template operating agreement. And I'm not signing it. I'm not being too formal with it. I'm also not using these LLCs for really anything. But I also can open bank accounts and payment processors without formally signing the operating agreement or sending it to anyone. So I can see how people can clearly operate and go without ever signing their operating agreement. Do you have any stories or any examples of when this backfired or when it became an issue?
It's not always an operating agreement. When it's an LLC, it's an operating agreement. When it's a C corp, it'll be the bylaws, that sort of thing, resolutions. But let's say it's a O1 visa. This is a visa for individuals with extraordinary ability. I work with some founders who are, foreign entrepreneurs who found a U.S. company, right? Now they're seeking a visa so they can work for it. Well, that really gets down to, in the operating agreement, what is their role? Are they just an owner and that's it, or do they do something else? And and do they have what sort of voting power do they have to make decisions within the company? Because with that particular visa, this is just one example, but in that particular visa, the company has to be able to hire and fire them, and they have to have a detailed list of their job responsibilities. So it's kind of unusual, right? It's a founder; they own the company, but in order to get this visa, they have to have a legitimate employer-employee relationship with their own company, right? So they can be fired. They won't lose their ownership interest. Anyway, it's a bit of a complex scenario, but actually I deal with it quite often. And
Quick aside, do
yeah,
they
yeah.
do that do they make a corporate election for the LLCs in that example, or do they keep it as a self-employed, like a single member LLC, and then pay themselves on payroll, which is quite odd from a tax
I
perspective?
honestly, I turn that over. I always advise my clients to work with somebody like you who knows taxes and all that, and work it all out. Whatever works best for them, I tell them that's fine with me. All I care about is that the structure works well for the visa
They get the
that they
visa
want.
approved, right? That's what they're hiring you to get the visa approved, right? Yeah.
That's right. But in this case, I mentioned with the O1, it's not the only example. The structure means everything. And a lot of times that's set forth. Well, with an LLC, it is set forth in the operating agreement, because if you look at these formation documents, just the basic formation, it just says the name of the company. You might have a name or two there, but you don't really know who owns what until you
Yeah.
open up the operating agreement. And the operating agreement is a internal corporate document. It's not public, but you still need to have
Yeah.
it to prove to other people that you're the owner or or that you don't have control over the company if you want to be hired by it, that sort of thing. So it really controls. And that's why it's so important when you're going for that visa, or you're going to the bank. If you at some banks, you might not need it. I know that's true with some, but others are going to want to see, do you really own this? Let me see the operating agreement.
But the concept is crazy that you can open these Wyoming LLCs, your name's not on anything, and you just apply for stuff like you own it, but there's nothing showing that you own it. So
Right.
when uh, I like to see when a client comes to me or when we help someone open an LLC, we would want the articles and then a resignation of the organizer kind of document, and
Yeah.
then also an operating agreement. I find the biggest things that the biggest issues or reasons for the operating agreement are when you have more than one owner. It's super important to formalize it when there's more than one owner. And often, an issue that has come up sometimes is having a "what happens if I die" clause in there. Because
Okay.
sometimes, especially if there's more than one owner, if you die and you have nothing in there, you have no will, then it can be kind of a mess. At least if you have a signed operating agreement saying what happens when you die, we have something to work with. So those are kind of clauses that we would recommend people think about.
Certainly, you have to deal with the ownership. Who's contributing what? Is somebody putting in money? Somebody putting in, their sweat equity, whatever. That's all got to be spelled out. I think, what the various responsibilities are of each party. But yeah, you got to have the basics in there. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those specific ones, like what if the person dies? Sure. Uh, what law applies? What law applies to the company? All these things.
Exactly, like
Uh,
what
I, I,
country is yeah,
I've
it's a
been
lot.
involved in some. I've been involved in some cases, not lately, because I'm trying to keep everything clean with my clients, so we don't get into these messy situations. But I've been a lawyer for a long time, and not that long ago, I got involved with a case. It wasn't litigation, but they were arguing a lot amongst themselves. This was a company, and they had various owners. I think it was an LLC, yeah. But man, they didn't get it straight in the operating agreement about the ownership, and everything mattered at that point. When there's a dispute, if you don't have an operating agreement, you're screwed. You don't know then it's like it's what somebody thought was the deal. If you
It's
don't write
super
it down,
important,
and yeah,
especially
and
with
when
more than
everything's
one
fine,
owner. Yeah.
sorry, when everything's fine, nobody's worried about it. But then suddenly there's a dispute, a misunderstanding. At least you can go back to the papers and say, okay, this is what we agreed to. And even then, you might have a dispute. And even then, if you're not getting along, then it's a matter of enforcing what's in there. And in this case, which was very messy, uh, yeah, we looked at everything, ownership, what it takes to get out. Can this one buy out the other one? It was complex, and that all came down to the operating agreement, and went back and forth on that. I will again. This has been a while. I remember it because it was very contentious. But now I just make sure. Usually it's my clients. It's one or two. Usually it's one person, sometimes two. Just keep it real clean, real simple.
Yeah.
Uh, Let me just one more example is I do a lot of E2 visas. These are E2 investor visas where a foreign entrepreneur comes in, invests at least 100,000 in the U.S. business that they'll direct and develop once they get the visa, right? So they have a business that's set up. Well, there are certain requirements in order to get the visa. One is that the E2 visa applicant own at least 50% of the U.S. business. So ownership. So where does that get spelled out? In the operating agreement, right? Or if it's a C corp, in the bylaws and all that, the resolutions. But it's got to be clear. And again, I always make sure that happens, at least 50% ownership. And then that if there's going to be somebody else involved, is this really somebody you want to do business with?
I have a follow-up question
Yeah,
in regards to these are kind of for me too, because these are things I'm curious about. With the C corporation, I know the bylaws are important. Issuing the shares and doing all
yeah.
that paperwork is like important. What what's the requirements for having a board of directors for for a corporation or for a an LLC? Is that a requirement to have a board of
Well,
directors?
for an LLC, no, there's not a requirement.
No.
Uh, every C corp I've ever worked with had a board of some kind. Yeah, board of directors minutes and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Um, Yeah, I mean, I have a client now. He's going for that O1 visa I mentioned earlier, where he's got to he owns the company with his wife. He's a foreigner again, and he's got a company here in the States, and he set it up as an LLC, and now we're in the process of converting it to a C corp. So, and we're doing that because we want to have a board, and the board is going to have control. So the board can hire and fire him if
Okay.
he gets his O1, right? He gets his O1 visa, then he can come in hired. He has an employment agreement with the board, and the board can fire him. And that's the idea, to have a, you know, entity sort of, it's part of the company, but that's where the control rests. I think so. Yeah.
So I want to talk about this setting up the LLC, and then now I want to transition briefly. And you may not have a ton of expertise here, but in terms of like the litigation landscape. So a lot of clients, let's say, file patents, file trademarks. People might get into a contract where they don't fulfill the service. What's the litigation landscape like? Let's say, for example, I am a non-resident person, and a client signs a contract, and they promise they're going to pay me $12,000 a month for a year to do this service, and then they want to cancel it. What are my recourses, and how does that process kind of work in general to like either sue them, demand money from them, like what, just like
Yeah. Yeah.
on that a little bit, if that's
Oh,
enough
sure, sure,
context.
sure. Litigation. I was a litigator in a big firm for a long time, so I've seen it come and go. And basically, one of the reasons you set up an LLC or a C corp, one of the main reasons, is to protect yourself against liability, right? So they can sue the company, but not you individually. That's why you do it. It's one of the main reasons. So if there's a dispute involving your company becomes the party to the litigation, almost like it's a separate individual. You think of it like that. Uh, that's all I would say. I mean, if you have a dispute, the company sues them, sends a letter, company hires a lawyer. The company's on its own.
And yeah, so the company, your company, their company, whichever side it is, someone's making a demand of the other side to fulfill a contract, to pay some money for some damages, and then they have to resolve it either in court or outside of court via the attorney. Is that kind of,
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
yeah,
I think most of the time in my career, you try to work it out short of litigation, right? You try to
yeah,
settle, but there's always got to be that threat of litigation there, and that would be, yeah, your company, your LLC or C corp filing a lawsuit in
filing
whatever court.
like I usually see it in steps, like a formal legal demand with
Sure.
threat of litigation, then litigation, try and resolve it. So you try and open the conversation. I mean, we try and avoid this in general. A lot of clients will come to me for an amount, and if it's like they're like, this guy owes me $5,000. I'm like, yeah, you can send him a letter, but you're not gonna, I don't know, go to court for $5,000. It's not worth it at the end of the day. I
I'm
mean,
with you.
from my experience.
I'm with you on that. I discourage it. Even my own father, he used to be, oh, sue this one, sue that. I'm like, Dad, I know I'm a litigator, but I know from being in the trenches, you don't want to do it unless you absolutely have to. It's a mess.
Yeah.
But a lot of foreigners are probably going to watch this video, and I would say they get scared of the U.S. legal system, and I would say it's not that bad. It really isn't. I mean,
The
if you play by the rules, you do business with good people. Chances are things are going to go fine.
there
And
is,
yeah,
yeah. I'll let you finish your thought because I want examples of how it is bad.
go ahead. In my experience, if like I don't, all my clients right now, there's no litigation. Okay, so I don't. I'm
Yeah,
not.
I mean, I don't see it a
Yeah.
lot, but the real litigation in the U.S. is like the personal injury disaster of
Oh yeah,
America, which is
sure, sure.
like a guy walking in Walmart and then a crate falls on him and he sues him for $100 million. Like that. That's where like the U.S. is litigious in terms of people suing big companies nonstop. But that's why if you have a physical business, you should have insurance. If you have like a big store, you need insurance. You need to like protect yourself. Most of the people you and I are dealing with is like e-commerce or people selling brooms or people selling services, and there's really
Right.
very little legal risk for that kind of stuff. You lose the contract if you if you too bad, you're not going to get sued.
It comes up a lot in the intellectual property context. I think you alluded to that earlier.
Yeah,
I've actually done that, a lot of that in my career. Not so much anymore. Mostly just trademarks now. But people do say, "Hey, this one's infringing my trademark. I want to sue them." And I'm like, "You should find a lawyer who's a litigator who does those cases because I don't do them anymore."
that's a great segue to my like kind of fine circle of this conversation is kind of when do you need to work with an attorney and how do you find a good attorney. So those, it's like a two steps question for you.
We start with the second part. I would say these days, social media is really helpful. It used to be that you had only a few a few websites to go to, and they all sent you these big firms. Now you can use social media, type in whatever you're looking for, and then watch some attorneys and see if you like the person. I mean, you're going to be dealing with this guy or gal. Do you like their style? You have to watch a couple of videos, see where they're coming from. Do they have a sense of humor? James, you obviously have a sense of humor. I appreciate that. But I mean, this is what you want. You're gonna. So I would say social media is where I would go to find. That's where I would go first. Type in what you're looking for and see what happens. Friends, of course, are always a good, referrals from friends who have had a good experience. That's always good. So that's what I would say.
My best source, whenever I need an attorney, I always ask attorneys I've worked with, and they always have a good network of trusted attorneys. And just like everything else right now, everyone's a specialist. So you'll that's how you don't have to go to one of the biggest law firms and pay $2,000 an hour for people to consider what they're gonna who's gonna assign to your case. It's gonna be super expensive. They may be awesome and they may have the best people there, which is fine. But most people don't need that, and it's better to. In my opinion, I like working with smaller firms with specialists who kind of only do that. You have to look a little harder to find them, but once you find them, then you have good people at more reasonable costs. Yeah, so if you have an attorney you worked with, ask him. They have networks. I know that my friends are all on chats with the attorney chats. There's 50,000 of them in the same group, and they're all chatting each other all day. Are you on those, the Florida bar chats?
No,
Oh, okay.
I'm too busy. I don't have
Yeah, I
time to
don't.
chat.
It's like I don't know. It's like a WhatsApp group or something, and they're all
No,
these attorneys. It's always no.
I wish I had
Well,
more time.
so many people are like, I want to go public. I want to open this corp and go public with my business. And I had another client reach out to me about it yesterday about that. And I was like, I've had this conversation 100 times and no one's gone public yet.
When it comes to going public, really all I know is that the ownership has to be really clear, and how they allocate, how they can bring new people in and issue shares has to be really clear. And if it's not, nobody's going to invest.
Yeah,
So
this
it's
is in summary, if you want to go public with your company, you need to get a good corporate attorney who does IPOs and they
yeah.
will redo everything. But the most important thing is to have an MVP, a minimum viable product that is worth investing in, that people want to invest in, and then go to them and they'll change all the back end paperwork. And if you want to get an investment from somebody, this is why I tell people also, if you want to get someone to just invest, a private company to invest, they can give you a convertible note into anything. And if they're investing over $100,000, they probably have corporate attorneys they work with too, which will also prepare the appropriate legal documents to review what you've already done. So
Well, I,
again, if even if right,
all I would add is two things. One is make sure your corporate documents aren't a complete mess. I mean, yes, they can fix everything, but try to keep it clean and
that's what he
simple.
said.
Is good.
Operating agreement, clean docs,
Simple.
file
Keep it
every year the
simple.
renewal.
Everybody
Yeah.
should understand what the deal is. That's number one. Number two is there are a lot of great accelerators and incubators for young companies, and that's a great way to get funding. And I think probably anybody who's interested in that is aware of it. But it goes a long way, not just in raising money, but also in the immigration context.
Yes. Thanks for being here, man. Any closing
Thank you,
thoughts?
James. No, but I
No.
would just say, yeah, get an attorney. It's important not to screw it up. Setting up your company, and then get a really good tax advisor. You're going to need one especially if you're a foreign entrepreneur.
I
You don't
work.
want.
I used to be a DIY guy, but now I work with attorneys for everything. I pay so much money to attorneys last year, and it makes me feel better at the end of the day to know that I'm not breaking the law with,
But
especially when it comes to like certain contracts, agreements, business practices, or
but I
whatever. So
wasn't
it's good
paid
to
for
get that
this.
opinion. Eh?
I
What do you
wasn't
say?
paid for this though.
Yeah. You need to work on the
That's all
negotiation. Thanks
right.
for being here. I'll see you on the next video,
See ya.
everyone.